firearms inspection and troubleshooting. This week, we'll be talking about blowback actions. All right. Blowback actions are very interesting firearms. A lot of those plinkers love to use blowback actions, and we'll find out in a minute why. But always, guys, we always talk about, do you have the right tools? All right. It's very important that we always have the right tools on hand to get the job done. In this week's spotlight, we will be focusing on calipers, and digital calipers to be exact. Now, these are very, very good when you need precise measurements. And as we all know, when we're dealing with firearms, we are always talking about precise measurements, right? We're always talking about close tolerances. And these little handy things will let you get to those close measurements. Now, you want to make sure you get a set that will allow you a good margin of repeatability. All right. Always remember, measure twice, cut once. That's the old saying. Now, let's talk about these blowback action firearms. Now, this week, we'll be taking a look at the Glock 44. And the Glock 44 is one of the newer Glocks to the market, and it shoots 22 rimfire. Now, the reason I talked about plinking earlier is because if you're not shooting 17s, 22 rimfire is the plinking cartridge. As with everything, you always want to do your safety check. You want to make sure that that firearm is empty, completely empty, nothing poking out, nothing prodding anything. Check that magazine well. Also, you want to check that magazine. Now, as I said before, what we're looking for is the follower. If we can see the follower in that magazine, then we know that it is empty, right? So once we get done checking all of those things and ensuring that that firearm is clear, you can go ahead and begin your function and safety check. Now, with an empty magazine, you can test out that magazine release button, make sure it works properly, make sure that magazine falls freely. You can also check the slide stop level, make sure that it is functioning properly. Make sure that it holds that slide back. Also, just make sure that it releases properly. Now you can start the disassembly process. On the 44, these are the takedown levers. Now, there's one on both sides, and it's very simple. You just pull down on those, pull back on the slide very slightly, right? You can let the slide go, depress the trigger, and the slide should come off. Remember, guys, there should be no live ammunition present in this workspace. Now, once you get the firearm completely disassembled, that's those 4 or 5 main parts, you can go ahead and start to check those internal components. Now, once you're looking at the barrel assembly, you always want to make sure that you're checking the crown. Also, make sure that you're checking that feed ramp, checking the barrel hood if there is one. Make sure there's no marring, no peening over, no rolling over, anything like that. This slide assembly is very important, and it's very interesting to that blowback design because the slide, you have to make sure that you reduce the amount of mass that's in the slide, right? You have to make sure you do that for the blowback design to work. But you also want to make sure that you check those internal components. In your frame, the same thing. You want to make sure that you're checking all of those internal components. Make sure that you're checking the rails to make sure that they are in good working order. Make sure there's no pinning over or rolling over. And you can now go ahead and start to put that pistol back together, right? And the reassembly process, as always, guys, is just the opposite of the disassembly process. Make sure that you're putting lube, and if you're doing a cleaning job or something like that, make sure you're putting lube in those high contact areas, metal against metal, always. It's going to be different amongst different people. I'm always of the mindset that there should be enough to see, but not enough that it is running or dripping. And remember, you always want to just put it in those high contact areas, okay? And once you get the firearm back together, you always want to make sure that you go ahead and rack the slide a couple of times. And remember, don't ride it, let it go freely, okay? You can go ahead and lock it back in the safety position, and you're ready to move on. Now, you know, I always like to leave you guys with some important takeaways. And I always say that these things are used to just drive home certain points or to keep things fresh in your minds, okay? You always want to ensure that there is no live ammunition present in your workspace. This is for a safety precaution, all right? And we can never, ever, ever compromise on safety. As I always say, remember that equation. You take one of those variables away, the equation no longer holds true, which means that that firearm cannot fire. Extremely interesting design on these blowbacks, especially on the Glock 44. One of the challenges with this design in this semi-automatic pistol is trying to make sure that you reduce the mass as much as you can on the slide, but ensure that it still remains functional. This one is actually a polymer design, which is very, very interesting. Also, just because of that smaller caliber, these types of firearms should still be handled with the same safety precautions, guys. We want to make sure that we still maintain our highest level of safety whenever we're working with firearms, and that's any type of firearm, regardless of the caliber. Last but not least, you always want to make sure that there is no live ammunition present in your workspace. This is mandatory. Remove one of those variables, guys. Let's remain safe when we're working. Now, understanding the blowback action in its simplest form is basically just taking the energy that's used or created by those gases every time a shot is taken, using that energy to push backwards or rearwards or blow back. Understanding that simple action, what are some of the challenges can be faced by shooters when they're on the range and they have a squib load with the blowback action? Are they the same as regular actions? Will they present different challenges, different problems, different things that we can pick up on to understand what's actually going on? Hey, let's have a good week, guys. Let's get to work.